The big question is, should pastors use AI in their sermon prep, and should AI write your sermons? And I've never bumped into a pastor in my context who's even thought about doing that. It's the big question on the things we're hearing from other voices, but it's not quite that internal discussion that we're having with each other. It's more about, I don't know what this thing really is. I have some handle on some of it, and I don't know how to help my people in my church think wisely about it. Right? Because my counsel for someone regarding AI is going to be different for a member who's a software engineer or someone who's working at a car manufacturing plant making parts and using all that. As far as using it in ministry, a lot of it that I hear is about sermons, but a lot of the conversations behind closed door are more pastoral care type conversations and thinking about how to do that well.
Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech? We live in 2026 and the era of AI is upon us. In fact, the myth of AI, the fable of AI, what is it, Joel? It's a new era of AI that is totally new compared to the last 10 years. I don't know. All of a sudden things get built now. You can make a whole video game with one prompt, apparently, according to some of the things that Claude has been pushing out. We are in an accelerating time of AI, and we need to think about what pastors are doing to respond to this. I would push back on the framing that AI is the most important issue of our day. I would say the most important issue of our day is making disciples. And so I wanted to talk to somebody about that and talk to a pastor who is, I'm just going to call you this, Scott. You are the average pastor, okay? We are not talking to a mega church pastor of multi-campus sites. We're not talking to, a pastor of like a super small, 10 people in their church or a house church. You're just kind of if I were to think about the average size church, the average community, the fact that you're in Toronto, you're near Jane and Finch. If you're from Toronto, people will know that. You invited me to speak at your church a couple weekends ago, and I had a great time there. I love your hospitality. You are a former next door neighbor of mine. Listeners might be interested to know that you and I grew up playing basketball together. At least I would always want to play basketball with you. But then when you went to high school, you became too cool for me. Still not always bitter about that, but a little bit still. But I'm so glad that we have rekindled our friendship thanks to social media. And thanks for joining us on What Would Jesus Tech?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm also glad to have rekindled our friendship, and I will take average as a compliment. I mean, if my wife said I am the average of anything, I will take it. So it's good.
You
I'm
can
glad
take it.
Yeah, no, happy to be here with you guys. Looking forward to talking with you.
So Austin unfortunately couldn't join. Joel is with me. Joel's as a product manager. He's working with AI day in and day out. I am doing a bunch with AI right now, but I'm more of a professor researcher side of things for my PhD. But Austin said this: I am particularly curious to hear how the conversation about AI use among pastors is playing out in Scott's context or relationships. There have been a lot of things written about pastors using AI, written to pastors, often by non-pastors, while the peer-to-peer conversations behind closed doors from a pastor to one another might be entirely different. So what's the conversation like for you, Scott? You go to different pastoral retreats, talk to other pastors. What are pastors saying when it comes to AI?
One of the things that comes up a lot is just how unfamiliar and unaware of a lot of AI stuff pastors are. And I put myself in that boat as well. Like, we kind of talk about AI as if it's this, you mentioned again, this mythos thing, and we don't really have a handle on what it is, how it can be used, how it should be used, what we can use it for. And generally the stuff that I've read or heard from the guys Austin was talking about who write to pastors who are not pastors, the big question is, should pastors use AI in their sermon prep, and should AI write your sermons? And I've never bumped into a pastor in my context who's even thought about doing that. It's the big question on the things we're hearing from other voices, but it's not quite that internal discussion that we're having with each other. It's more about, I don't know what this thing really is. I have some handle on some of it, and I don't know how to help my people in my church think wisely about it, right? Because my counsel for someone regarding AI is going to be different for a member who's a software engineer or someone who's working at a car manufacturing plant making parts and using all that versus someone who works at No Frills and stock shelves. Like those
Mm.
conversations are going to be very different. So as far as using it in ministry, a lot of it that I hear is about sermons, but a lot of the conversations behind closed door are more pastoral care type conversations and thinking about how to do that well.
Hmm. And maybe it's just a good moment to pause and say, what even is pastoral care? What is the job of a pastor? Because we have a bunch of people who just work in tech and listen to our podcast to think about it ethically. And we often are dumbing down the tech side to Christians, but maybe you could dumb down, like, I thought pastors only work 1 day a week, Scott, and all they do is sermon prep. You're saying there's something called pastoral care?
Yeah, there's more. It's funny. There's uh, so many. I think I've had 10 conversations with people, not at my church, but just around my neighborhood. When I tell them I'm a pastor, they go, "Oh, that's great. What do you do for work?" As though like, I'm like, no, I work full time in ministry. Like, you can do that? That's wild.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just not to dumb it down per se, but to take a couple of biblical passages. In Acts 6, there's that scene in the church in Jerusalem where there's certain widows are not getting the food that they need from the distribution, and a group goes to the apostles, and the apostles say, you know, pick from among yourselves 7 who will help with this. We're going to devote ourselves to the ministry of the word and prayer. And now, in context, that's the apostles, but that's often been applied for pastors and ministry. And so, pastors are people who are devoted to the ministry of the word and prayer. They're Bible guys who teach and preach the Bible in the church, in a church setting, and are devoted to prayer, and that personal prayer, corporate prayer, praying with others,
Mm.
um, and all of those things. So teaching the Bible, communing with God in prayer, and leading others in that as well. Right? That's making disciples, as you mentioned at the beginning. That's really the biggest need in the church at any age, because that's the commission Jesus gives to the church for every age. And part of how that happens is through the ministry of the word and prayer, as pastors give themselves to that. The other passage that's important to remember is, there's a few, but one is 1 Peter 5, where Peter addresses the elders in the churches that he's writing to, and he tells them to shepherd the flock of God that is among you. And that metaphor of a shepherd is what a pastor is called to do. There's a sense of leading, there's a sense of feeding, there's a sense of protecting, guiding, caring, and all that. So for your average pastor, um, the week fills up with a lot of phone conversations, a lot of just checking in and seeing how people are doing. Sermon prep is a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And then there's all kinds of other behind the scenes business that is boring for average people to hear about and
Because there's
whatnot. But those are,
well, you're the only paid staff. Well, you're the only paid pastoral staff at your church, right?
yeah, I'm the only paid pastor. I have 2 other wonderful brothers who serve as lay elders. But as far as salary and working for the church, that's just me.
But you have a property near Jane and Finch, so you are ultimately responsible for managing something like that, right?
Yes.
So that's like
Yes.
one of those
Yes.
administrative responsibilities that might not get come up, and it's like, oh, you have people using your parking lot, and guess what? You get to manage that. You have a
Yep.
thing on site that you rent out in order to like make some money that you're using the space well and that sort of thing. Like it's there's all these like little administrative tasks, right? That
Yep.
you do that you didn't even reference because you probably don't even like talking about it.
No, it's the thorn in my side, really. Right. And we've got an old building, so there's always things that are falling apart. So
Hmm.
yeah. So at least one afternoon of my work week is taken up with building stuff or rental stuff or administrative tasks that aren't in any seminary course on pastoring.
Well,
Right.
Andrew, I don't know if you're building up to this, but like my question is, in those pastor to pastor conversations, are you talking about, can AI take this thorn away from me?
Yeah, that's actually one of the big things is like how and just to be open about my own situation, I don't use AI for a lot of things, and part of it is just because I don't know how to use it very well. But a lot of the questions are like these day-to-day administrative thorns. How can we use tools to do that better, right? So like with our rentals, one of the things that myself and our administrative assistant have started doing is we'll use AI to draft a rental agreement and then go over it together rather than because she's only casual, she's working 5 hours a week max. Um, and so to maximize the time, we'll have it draft that rental agreement for us and then go over it together rather than working from scratch ourselves. But yeah,
And
that is
did you get that idea from a pastor, a friend, just seeing it in media of like, oh, legal agreements are going to get replaced with agents or something like that?
no, it was interesting. I'm sure I heard it somewhere, Joel, but it was one of those where I wrote an email to her and I said, "Hey, can you draft this agreement?" And then it was like right after that, I'm thinking, okay, well, she's not going to see this email till tomorrow morning. And then she'll send me an email, draft it. And so it'll be like 2 or 3 days before we get to it. And I said, let me just, pop open Chat GPT for a second and see what it can come up with. Um, and so like, I'm sure I heard it somewhere and someone mentioned it, but off the top of mind, it was just more of like, this is going to take a while to get to where we want to get with this contract. Let's just see what happens. Um,
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, I'm a congregant and I go to my pastor and I'll say like, hey, this is the latest in AI. We're like way past Chat GPT now. And it's like part of why this pod even exists is to
yep.
like help inform, church leaders, people in ministry, and then also intersect them with technologists and like keep that intersection thriving. But even in my day-to-day conversation with pastors, I was like, did you know you could have a council of agents where multiple agents like, disagree with each other and you can like have them debate something and then create a different artifact? And they're like, no, I had no idea, right? There's just this like still tooling and awareness gap, which to be fair is not to just pastors. I think like anyone
Mhm.
outside of your core tech bubble is not going to be
Yep.
exposed to that. So definitely it's an interesting problem as a technologist, putting my technologist hat on to be like, how do we help, you know, um, the people in our church? Because we all go to churches around the world, and how can we be part of that solution or even meet and have that conversation to begin with?
Yeah. And it
Mhm.
feels like to me, it's a lot of working backwards from the product can do X, Y, and Z, and then saying to you, we have a problem that meets that. Whereas traditionally, product management, Joel, you would say, like, you need to identify the problem first and then identify the appropriate technology for it. So Scott has already ruled out, apparently, sermon prep. You're just like, that's not a problem that needs solving. You recognize we could rehash all the arguments against pastors doing sermon prep, but that's not even on your radar. Instead, you're more curious about, wait a second, for a rental agreement, oh, this will save me time, because that's legalese anyways. It's just like you need something
Yep.
on paper, you need an agreement. Like I remember when I had to sublet during university, of course I was looking for a template online. And so whenever it comes to something where you used to Google search and look for a template, I would recommend to pastors absolutely use AI. Instead of going online for a template, let
Mhm.
AI access all of the templates that have been made online for you. And then you can customize it just by typing in natural language. And that is a time saver for sure. I wonder about that problem of, making a document that's not a personal document, not a human centric document. What are the other documents, the thorns in your side that you do on a regular basis that might be like that? They're more task driven, policy driven, procedural. It just needs to be done, but it doesn't require you to pray at the end of it. Normally. I mean, you're a pastor. You're like, we're supposed to devote ourselves to prayer. You've already said that, but I'm kind of trying to think of other problems that you're experiencing to work backwards from the problems into the solution of whether or not AI is a fit.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, well, really, the only other thing that I really use AI for at the moment is for meeting minutes, right? And like all of your board meetings and staff meetings, not that I have staff meetings with myself, but as the only staff member. But for other churches, board minutes, staff meetings, you got to have minutes because there's all the legal stuff that goes with that, right? And we had for years, it was just a hassle to see who's going to write the minutes. The secretary for the board wouldn't be able to make a meeting. What do we do? And a lot of that in my context was just like, okay, I'm the one who works for the church. All of you work full-time jobs and then volunteer for the church. So I'll take that on. So I've
Mhm.
started using AI to draft the meeting minutes and just use whatever Zoom has built in. But
Hmm.
one of the tools that my wife recommended, because her coworkers have used this, is something like, I think it's called Fathom AI or Fathom note taking or something like that. So using tools like that, but again, it's the same thing. It's here's a problem, and here's how AI helps me fix that task. And and that's a lot of what I find with the administrative tasks in pastoral ministry is that's how I think about it, and I think that's how other pastors think about it, is
Mhm.
working backwards to say here's the tool, how can it help me solve whatever problem is there, or just even thinking here's a problem, what's the fastest way to solve it. um, and I wonder
Mhm.
for you guys, like my question's running back to you, is that the best framework for pastors to think about AI? Would you like them to think about it, your pastor to think about it in a different framework? Um, does it matter to you how much time your pastor spends thinking about AI in that context?
I
That's a
mean,
funny.
yeah, I was gonna riff on the product point of it, as Andrew is probably aware. Like there's a phrase called "jobs to be done," which is basically like, what is the job that a person is trying to accomplish? So, for example, um, you just came back from the gym or you just finished your workout. You're thirsty, right? There's multiple products that could do that. You could have like Gatorade, you could have, an energy drink, you could have like protein powder mixed into something. Those all kind of meet that job of like giving you some energy and like quenching your thirst at the same time. And then the way a product manager might think about it is like, oh, what if we actually like create a product that you took before the workout that kept you more hydrated throughout it, and then that could be a competitor product, right? So that's like kind of one way that we think about it. And oftentimes, what ends up happening is a technological shift kind of massively disrupts um, what you can do. And also, like, what is the pain point is the other kind of like buzzword of like, what problem are you solving? What customer pain point? And there might have been a bunch of pain points that you said, oh, that's like way too difficult to solve in the past. But now this like inflection point happens and now it can be solved. So in general, that is like happening because of AI. Everyone's like, all these things that I didn't think I could solve that were kind of status quo. Now I'm revisiting them.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if that light bulb moment is really happening for people in ministry right now, or if they're kind of just hearing about it, but it's honestly like, I'm still too overwhelmed with my main role and all the stuff I have to do. I don't have the time to invest to get better, which, to be fair, is how everyone feels. Even the engineers, even the product
Yeah.
managers are like, I have too much going on. I can't invest in upskilling myself. So that's not a unique problem.
Well, and the technology is
Mhm.
changing so much that to just be like, oh, I better learn about AI and implement it. Like I saw a post that was written by a thought leader. I won't name them, but they wrote something like 15 prompts to make you a better pastor. And I downloaded it and it was very cringe. It was essentially including some advice that doesn't align with actual use of AI. It said you should just tell AI to write in your words, in your manner of speak, and just give it a few pages of your own style of speaking and writing. But that doesn't work. Like you can't get it to write in your style. And the other reason why it was cringe or potentially even immoral is that it basically implied you should deceive your staff by writing emails to them that portray it as you writing the email when really it was an AI writing the email. So this gets into some of the I would not simply want pastors to think about jobs to be done. Can AI do it? What's my pain point? Can AI fix it? You absolutely should think in those questions and answers, but you also need to think about how do I glorify God in making this decision? Are there things that I am going to lose as a result of this? How am I going to change as a result of this? Um, sure, what are the benefits? But every time you add a benefit, any technology also takes something away. So there might be an intimacy to a meeting that isn't recorded that changes as soon as you start to say, oh, by the way, we're recording this meeting. And that might decrease the intimacy, the vulnerability that people might share, even though the meeting topic was just supposed to be business. I'm not saying that it's wrong to use it in the way that you're using it. I think it makes sense, especially given your situation. But I could understand why some pastors might say no. And it's interesting still thinking about what's the job to be done. This is more of a meta question of like, what is the role of pastors biblically? I think there's been a problem across North America of conflating the deacon office, the diaconal office, like you brought up Acts 6 right at the beginning. That distinction, I don't think we see in most churches. Even in your job, you have to do a lot of deacon type roles managing the building that yeah, you have a couple people helping you, but it's a culture shift to say we're going to have other people responsible for that. Because as you feel, you're like, well, I need to do the minutes because I'm the paid one. And I think there's a lot of servant hearted pastors like that who actually should be tapping into other people in the church to manage that kind of stuff and to delegate as much of that sort of tending on tables, anything. There's a lot of budget related items that decisions shouldn't be made at the elder level. That should be a deacon team that makes those decisions, in my opinion. And then ultimately, the elders team needs to manage their household well, the church's household well, and that's going to include finances. But that's one of the tensions in this conversation of there's the ideal, but then the reality is that's not going to happen. Like you're Scott, you're going to have to do some deacon stuff because of the size of your church. And I totally think it's appropriate to use AI to do that. So that's some of what I think about. It doesn't necessarily get to the next question, though, of what are the other things that we might think AI is a good use case for? But which we could go there in a second. But what are your thoughts based around what me and Joel have been saying?
Yeah, well, just to riff on that, I think those are really helpful. And Joel, it's really helpful for me to hear how you think about this because you and I are in very different worlds as far as our work. And so and I have people in my church who are also product development and whatnot. So that's really helpful to hear how you think about it. And just riffing off what you said, Andrew, just in case any of my deacons do listen to this podcast, I love you. You do great work. There's no like slamming on the deacons. But it is part of pastoral ministry is you're going to have to take that even in a larger church, right? My former church was much larger than what I am now. And there's people who would go up to the lead pastor and he would have a conversation about their issues with the parking lot. And like part of ministry is you care about the issues that people bring to you, whether you like they're big issues for you or not. If someone comes to you with an issue, you care about that issue because you care about that person.
Mm.
I think it is interesting too. Is I think one of the questions just that's circulating in my head coming off of what you guys said is in talking about pain points and thinking about that and that there's certain with any job, and I'm just thinking as a pastor here, so applying it to pastoral ministry. But with pastoral ministry, there are some pain points that you should not avoid, and that if you avoid them, you're actually being unfaithful to your calling.
Mm.
Right? The letters that Paul wrote to Timothy, they're part of what's called the pastoral epistles, and especially Second Timothy. I mean, one of the biggest themes is endure suffering. Endure suffering. If you're going to serve in ministry, it's going to be hard. There's going to be suffering. And Andrew, you shared that list in a group chat that you and I are in, and one of my reactions to that, along with the stuff you mentioned, was just like, this is getting AI to help you avoid things you shouldn't avoid, right? Like anticipate a hard conversation and help me with how to respond. Like that's yes, you should think about the hard conversation at a time, pray about it, but you shouldn't avoid that and come in with a pre-planned response to kind of duck that per
Mm.
se. Right? There's a certain pain point with any work that like you have to endure it. You have to persevere through it. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is whether or not um, how pastors think about AI is shaped more by trying to avoid pain points rather than to love people. And if we love
Mm.
people, there's going to be pain, right? C.S. Lewis has that great quote about, if you ever want to protect your heart from pain, lock it in a box, hide it, and don't ever give it to anyone else. Like there is a kind of pain that comes with loving each other well, and that's just life in a fallen world, right? And so as a pastor, I want to be able to lead my congregation in love. And part of that is not avoiding those hard conversations, not avoiding those difficult people, not avoiding those pain points. So part of the challenge, I think, is just trying to figure out what pain points should we not use AI for, and what pain points are like appropriate. Like the rental contract feels like an appropriate pain point. Um, but there's others that I'm just not sure, and just currently trying to figure out. And I think for one of the conversations that's come up a lot just in when talking with members of my church is, people have tons of questions about the Bible, about God, about faith, about life, and all that. And a lot of those questions don't have neat and tidy answers, or they don't lend themselves to quick answers, right? Like think of the problem of evil and suffering and how that's been reflected on throughout church history. There's never really been a quick, easy answer, right? It's something that leaves you sitting with mystery and leaves you sitting with more questions. And I get people coming to me and asking me questions, and the instinct that they have is, I need an answer immediately. I want an answer immediately. And part of that is, I think, how we've been formed by the like search tools that we have and things like that. We don't really have a capacity for mystery anymore. Last night I was watching a movie with my wife, saw an actor I thought I recognized, couldn't even sit through the scene, had to Google him and see who is this guy. And if God is incomprehensible, and if as Paul says in Ephesians 3:19 that the love of Christ surpasses knowledge, there's a sense in which we will never figure it out. We will always be left with questions. We will always be left with mystery. And in a way, that's part of the wonder of faith, right? The wonder of living in God's world. And there's a sense that I get from some of my conversations that the tools that we have, and this is not just AI. I'm not smart enough to pin it all on AI, but just the way we've been
No.
formed by the technology we have, we don't really have that capacity for mystery anymore. It's very uncomfortable to sit. It's a pain point, right? To sit with, well, I don't know. I don't know who this actor is, right?
Yeah.
And even more so, like, I don't know. I don't know why my spouse is suffering this illness. I don't know why my child is struggling with this. I don't know why my friend at church who gives really well and shows up faithfully is just being raked through the mud by other members of the congregation. Like all of these things that don't lend themselves to easy, quick answers. And if we're formed in such a way that we need that and we want that, then we're going to lose out on some of the slowness and the mystery that comes with spiritual maturity.
No, that's well said. There's a few points just to clearly identify it. One is just this tension between pain points and fixing them. And as you said, suffering is good. There's good aspects of experiencing pain. That mindset can be very foreign to the tech culture, where you literally do want to eliminate pain, and that gets into transhumanism and a whole bunch of vision of the world that we're not going to get into on
Yep.
this episode because we've covered it elsewhere. But your instinct there is strong. I'll relate it. There's a book that I'm listening through by Andrew Wilson that's about 1776. It's not about the American Revolution completely. It's about all these different changes that happened in that year. And one of the stories he tells is the early explorations to Australia and meeting people there in the different islands and just the cultures that were there. And they were so technologically inferior to the Europeans. But they all observed as they met these people is that they lived with a sense of peace and satisfaction with life that was completely foreign to these technological worlds. So there is this technology is good. We've covered it. It's good for us to alleviate pain, of course, but there can be an instinct and a natural habitat, a natural way of living that pastors need to avoid of, oh, there's a problem, I'm going to solve it. Oh, there's a problem, I'm going to solve it, rather than sitting with someone through pain and going through those steps. So I think you're giving our listeners just like a sense of how you're trying to cultivate a lifestyle and a love of God and people that doesn't naturally fit or align with the optimization mindset, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I do agree with everything you said. That and we've talked about it before. Like the loss of suffering has really changed perspective, and there's a lot we've lost in that. And I, think back to the example I gave earlier with going to the gym, and the interesting thing that's actually happening now with GLP-1s or, other um, products like that is like, well, you don't actually have to go to the gym anymore to lose weight, right? You can just like lose weight by taking
Mm,
these drugs. And then people are like, is that a little bit of a shortcut? From a, you know, product theory point of view, it is affecting the job to be done of I want to go to the gym to lose weight. So it is replacing that and it is a competitor in that sort of thinking. On the other hand, if the job to be done is to build muscle, it doesn't actually complete that task,
mm,
right? You lose the weight, but you're maybe frail, you're not building the muscle, and that only comes from pain. So this analogy is to say that how you actually frame the pain point is very important to kind of what
mhm,
is good product or good product strategy or moral product, even if you want to say it like that. A different way of looking at it is like, hey, it is going to be painful to lift weights. You are going to have muscle soreness, and that is actually like part of muscle growth. But are we having more pain than we need to? Are there things in that where it's like, hey, you should warm up? Otherwise, you might actually like hurt yourself
mhm.
unnecessarily in the goal of like developing strength. And this, like, hey, this, like, I don't know, gizmo or whatever making is like helps you warm up like a roller thing or something like that. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, so there is like a deeper and correct level of like how we should think about which pain points should we properly work on and how they
Mhm.
affect us.
Yeah. That's a really helpful point, Joel. And as someone who used to be an athlete and now pulls my hamstring cutting onions to put in soup, the warming up thing really, really hits home. But I think you're right. Like it's where there's good pain and then there's the pain that is unnecessary. And there's pain that happens from foolishness that we can avoid, right? Like not warming up before you exercise. Um, it's just got me thinking, one of the challenges with preaching for pastors is that you're preaching to such a wide group, and there's going to be people in the congregation who, like you, are their product developers. There's going to be people in there who are 90 who have no idea what AI even stands for. And then you got kids and like, so it's one of the things, and this is not AI related, but just a tension that a lot of pastors feel that I've heard and that I've felt is there's things I say in sermons that I really pray the wrong that certain people don't take it as directed at them.
Mhm.
So if the tone of the text I'm preaching is a rebuke, well, then there's people sitting in the congregation who are, they need to pick me up, and I'm like, I really hope you don't hear this rebuke directed at you, right? Like I preached through Ecclesiastes a while ago, and at the end of the beginning of chapter 1, it just ends with hopelessness. And in my sermon, I ended with hope. I went the opposite direction of the text. And I went with, it's, if you look at life under the sun, life looks hopeless. If you look at life in Christ, life is full of hope. Um, and I remember a conversation afterwards said, why didn't you end where the text ended? And I said, well, because these 5 people are sitting in the front row and they had a horrible week that had nothing to do with themselves. And what they need in this moment is to know that life is not hopeless. So there's part of me where, like, part of the congregation, I wanted them to hear that, like, you're too chipper, like you're naively chipper, and you need to be sobered up by life a little bit. But then there's another part. It's like you need this encouragement, and it's hard because you're like, I don't want, because when I said what I said about mystery and all that, like I don't want people who work in jobs in like software development, like to hear like, oh, I shouldn't be creating these products or thinking along these lines. Like you
Mhm.
should,
Mhm.
and it glorifies God, the work that you do. Um, and so it's a really helpful way you framed it, Joel, just to help me think about like how do you frame the pain and how do you talk more specifically about the good pain versus the bad pain?
Mhm.
Because that helps with that kind of application.
Well, and it's funny because there was a recent Sunday where a guest speaker came up and he was talking about missions and how, like people are trying to think about using AI in missions. And he's like, just forget about AI. Like, you don't need that. Just go straight. And uh,
Boo.
it's fun. Senior pastor came to me after and he's like, oh, like, yeah, what did you think when he said that? And because that, senior pastor in the audience was thinking about, oh, how is Joel going to receive this off of the pulpit?
Yep.
Right. Some people there obviously need to hear that and be like, okay, like, yeah, let's not overthink it. Let's go and
Yes.
like do the
Yes.
Yep.
work and
Good
like,
job, Joel.
yeah.
That's
And
true.
then some people who are actually working in the field be like, okay, this isn't directed at me to say like AI is bad. I mean,
Yep.
my percent, like, he probably doesn't realize that it's like saying, go walk to work rather than taking a car, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can walk, but maybe the car is better, maybe it's not. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the conclusion I came to is like there has to be room for the Holy Spirit to be ministering alongside you, right? You
Mhm.
have to like not maybe like worry to a limit of being like God will speak to that individual alongside
Yep.
these words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good, it's not Pentecostal, it's biblical, Joel, to bring up the Holy Spirit. So
Yes.
that's a good word. Um, I want to think through. So I asked, we have the latest model in our access right now, the one that broke the internet. Literally, the internet would have been broken if it was released improperly, because that's what Claude was saying, because it's security issues. So Mythos is a model, and then Joel, correct me if I am wrong, but Fable is just like the public version of that, right? It's the same
Mm.
underlying model. So I watch a YouTube video. AI Explained is a good YouTuber who goes into the details of the latest AI models and how they score on the latest benchmarks and stuff. And Fable, by all accounts, is just extremely good. So I got it to give me a list of top five AI uses for pastoral ministry.
Mm.
So the 5 that it came up with, and this is on high thinking, like it took its time, and it
And
uses
this
a
is
ton of,
fresh because this is just a couple days ago this came out. So this has probably
correct.
never been
Okay.
said before by any other model here.
This is fun.
Yeah, it's
We're breaking
yeah.
ground, guys.
So the 5, I'll go through them quickly, and then I'll just read what it put in bold. 1, administrative drafting and correspondence. 2, sermon preparation as research assistant, not ghostwriter. 3, accessibility and translation work. 4, teaching material adaptation. 5, counseling and visitation preparation, never substitution. So those are the 5 categories. I do think the first category, as we've kind of alluded to with doing some things, I would not personally ever get AI to write an announcement blurb for me. There's just something about that feels off-putting. It's like I've heard you, Scott, when I was at your church, do an encouragement to sign up for an event. That came from your heart as a human being who cares about the person running that event. To me, that's just wild. But to create a poster that you're gonna, or an image that's gonna go on Facebook, man, don't spend the hour that you might have to spend in Canva when you can just copy and paste the stuff in ChatGPT or Google Gemini now, and it'll just create that image for you that you can copy and paste. It might be a little bit cheesy, it might be a little bit cringy. You gotta keep that in mind, that it might look like AI slop to some people, even though it looks good to you, especially if it's cartoonish. So sometimes you might want to add in the prompt, make this a little bit more realistic. Don't include any people's faces, because AI generated faces at the level that's publicly available probably isn't the best idea. But there is some of that kind of stuff, even minute meeting minutes or things like that. There's also a way that it can be used to retrieve information that you might not remember. Like you can download some of these latest models. If you do want to pay for it on a monthly basis, you can download something like Claude to have on your browser, and then you can give it access to only a subsection of folders. That could include all of your sermon history, and it could search through your sermons going back however many sermons you have in that folder, and it's a much more advanced search. It would basically be turning your documents, whatever you give it access to in that folder, it's turning it into like an accessible, linkable internet. So there are some potential things like that, depending on what you're interested in and what you're doing. Similarly, like budgets, Claude is very good at Microsoft Excel. So it's generally speaking, AI isn't good at math when you just use a web browser. But if you give it an Excel document or ask it to create formulas for you, it will do that not like 10 times out of 10. It's very reliable when it comes to editing a Microsoft Excel document. Now you still need to oversee it, but there are some things there that you could literally just upload the last 10 years of Excel documents that have your budget in it, and it could create like some good insights for you so that you could reflect on, oh, this is increasing, this is decreasing. And you can make note to your people, I used AI to generate this report that summarizes our trends over the last, like, I'm very much in favor of disclosing AI use rather than hiding it. People are like, well, people have used Google all the time without disclosing it. AI is different. It's generating something. It's not just repeating something. So, so I do think there are some things there that might work in some circumstances. Volunteer schedules is another one that you could do to create. Like, I once had an email thread where everybody was replying all, sharing their availability, and there was 10 people. You could use something like Doodle, which is a website that allows for that, or you could literally just use AI and it would do that for you by copying and pasting things in there. So there are some administrative tasks that it can help with.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? And all of those things, like, makes complete sense. There's nothing in there that I would even push back on once.
Right.
Right.
Would you use it to parse Greek and Hebrew for you?
No.
Why not?
Because that's part of my work in the scriptures, in either sermon prep or devotion. And I'm not a biblical languages guy, so I use other tools to help me with that. But as far as like, parse this tool for me, parse this and tell me what it means and how it's used and all that, I want the work that I do in scripture, either in study for sermon or just even in devotional reflection for personal thing, that's just be as much me with my Bible as anything else.
Yep. But you still use commentaries. I've seen your library.
Oh yeah, I still use commentaries. I have Logos software. I will still, if I can't remember where a verse is, I will use Google and say Bible verse that says X, Y, because I know the words, but I don't know the reference, and find that. but as much as I can, I want it to be firsthand for what I'm getting from Scripture, and then what I'm giving to the church in the
Hmm.
ministry of the word.
And that makes so much sense to me because it's coming from you. Um, I think that's a big like heuristic when people are assuming that it's coming from you or it's something that you are delivering, that is kind of something that you are supposed to do as an elder when it's uniquely about you doing it. It just
Hmm.
seems like when people get it to write prayers for them, again, it just there's something about that. It's like that just is so strange. I'm not against using other people's written prayers in certain contexts. That can make sense too. It's just this like you spend time putting things in your own words and then it reflects something. It might not be as elegant as AI, and that's okay. I think we're
Hmm.
going to live in a world where people actually appreciate a lack of elegance
Yeah.
because there's such a polish in the digital world that the roughness and the sweat and the saltiness, as we've talked about before, of the physical
Hmm.
world is actually one of the most appealing things.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so you push back on that. It's interesting they talk about accessibility and translation work, sermon transcription and summarization for shut-ins, translation of announcements or teaching for multilingual congregations, plain language versions of liturgies or confessions for pastors serving immigrant communities. This is arguably the most pastorally significant use case on the list, says Fable.
Hmm.
And there is a tool, I forget the name of it right now, but there is a live AI translation tool that is being used in some congregations where if you have someone who's like, oh, I want to invite my mother, but she doesn't speak English, there
Hmm.
is tools out there made by Christians for churches. I could try to find it now, but I won't.
Yep.
Um, that yeah has that ability. So there are some things like that
Yeah.
that could make sense, right?
Yep. 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 And I think things like that, right? Those are ones where, like, if some churches choose not to use it, that's fine.
Mhm.
And if other churches choose to use it, that's fine. I think with with the elders, you need to think and talk about how we're going to use it, why we're going to use it, and is this the best way that we can lovingly help this person grow in their walk with Christ, right? Like, as if I could, the translation one makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, if you have members in the church who speak her language,
Mm.
then maybe there also might be a situation where there's a spot in the church where they can sit, where someone can translate the sermon as it's going, and it's not a distraction for everyone else, but and you build a connection between those people. But if you don't have that, then the AI translate tool is great,
Yeah.
right? And so those are kinds of things that, like, yes, but if you're going to adopt it thoughtfully,
Mhm.
right?
No. Yeah, no, you're raising some really good points. It's not just about adding it for the sake of the benefits. It's about considering when I add this, what will it take away? What will it
Yeah,
subtract?
yeah.
It might subtract
What's
a relational connection. That's super important.
Yeah, for sure, right? And an opportunity for someone in the church to serve, right?
Yeah.
Like, that one there, thinking, like, if you've got an older person who doesn't know how to serve in the church, but there's someone who they can translate things for, that's a very tangible way for them to exercise a gift that they have, right?
Mhm.
So, what did it say about the counseling stuff? I'm curious about that.
So it said, I will quote, reviewing what scripture and the traditions say about a situation before having a hard conversation, thinking through how to approach a grieving family, drafting a framework for a difficult elders meeting. The bright line. The tool prepares the pastor for presence. It never replaces presence, and the congregant disclosures should never be pasted into a chatbot, a confidentiality issue many pastors haven't thought through. It is good to bring up that point of like, you can't just use AI to like deal with, oh, I got a difficult email from a congregant. How do I respond? Like that, stuff like that. You are putting sensitive information from that
Hmm.
congregant. You can't be copying and pasting without permission.
Yep.
But yeah, so yeah, that's what it said. What's your initial reaction to that?
I think so. Logo Software had, I don't know if they still do, they had a counseling guide where you could search different issues, and then it would give you some resources on that from your Logos library, um, which is more general that seems to be very, very specific. Um, and I think like I don't as when it talks about the prepping stuff and like seeing what the tradition and scripture says and all that, my initial instinct is I don't know if that's I would say that's inherently wrong, but it wouldn't be my instinct to use it. My instinct would be more to try and have a conversation with a more seasoned pastor first. So
Mm,
whatever that tool is giving me, I would try to get it from another pastor first, and then go from there. Because again, there's a human connection there. Um, there's a there's and I know for myself at least the way that I'm wired, if I do things, if I went through the AI tool and got all these things, then I would in my head I would have the whole conversation planned out and know exactly where we're going to go. And then once things go off the rails, as they normally do when normal people talk to each other, and someone says something that takes things in a totally different direction, well, you're not prepared for that. Right now, things are off script. Whereas talking to another pastor, you get more general wisdom rather than specific situations. And here's things that might work. So my instinct would be more to like all of those things I would say pastors should do in prepping for things. Think about the hard conversation, think about the directions they can go. But personally would try to have that conversation with another pastor first, or even one of the elders in the church, or someone who I trust, a friend or whatnot,
yeah.
who's not part of the church, right? But
Yeah. Give me a
yeah.
call if you ever need, instead of going to ChatGPT. But no, I think the instinct is strong. I think the danger as you get into the habit of, oh, could I use AI for this? Which you already have some instinct of that, which I don't think is wrong. I have that same instinct now too. Could I use AI for this as opposed to Google? There can also be this thing that raises in you of, oh, maybe I can go to it for this as well, and this as well, and this as well. And to not set some of those walls, even if they're arbitrary, it's like whenever it's counseling, no, I'm going to work through that and it's going to take me more time. Whereas other people, they might be okay with saying, well, as long as it's in preparation and I'm not getting it to tell me exactly what to
Yep.
say. It's similar in some ways to writing articles. You and I both write articles for the Gospel Coalition Canada. And it's like, I don't love using AI um, through that process. And it gives you like just a direction to go. It gives you things that you might think of if and maybe that's a good thing to think of, but then it takes you off of the frame that you were on. And it can kind of distract from what is actually important related to the people that you interact with. And that's the contextual aspect of ministry. I feel like for pastors is so key. If
Mhm.
you generate your sermons or prayers or counseling things through AI, it just really won't have the context as specific as it can be. It just won't be as close. But yeah, there's all these things to think of. It's interesting to think through it. And who knows a year from now what it will be like, because we're already seeing, like, I don't know if you've seen it, Scott, in your email, but Gmail has just released AI summaries of email threads.
Mhm.
So we're already starting to go to something called headless, where I don't know what it is. Joel, what's headless?
Uh, headless means that there is no UI really. The agent is communicating behind the scenes. It's kind of like, the concept of front end, back end. So typically, like we have a front end UI that a user interacts with, and then behind the scenes, there's a back end, like a database or some queries happening. So now what's happened where you can just chat with an agent and the agent will go interact with that product. The agent doesn't need a UI. It just needs to know what software buttons do I click. So it has a headless mode where it just like communicates directly without a UI.
So imagine instead of interacting in an email app where you click on an email, see who it's from, interact with it, the AI is just giving you, hey, Scott, good morning. Here are your email. Here's the one top email for today that you should respond to in the next hour. And you don't worry about checking the rest because you just trust the AI agent to do some of that sift work for you. How does that sound?
It's an interesting feature, right? I can see that on your
That's
face.
yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I'm terrible at checking and responding to my emails anyways, so something like that might be appealing.
Would it make
But
things better or worse? That's the question. Who knows?
yeah,
Who knows? It's
yeah,
hard to tell.
I mean, here's
yeah.
a product idea I did come up with, and maybe we will figure out if this should take flight at some point, but a fractional deacon. I was thinking about how it's so hard, Andrew, what you said is like for pastors to actually say like, okay, we're going to get someone who's volunteering to do this sort of work. And then we can't afford to actually pay a full-time salary. But now if you have one person who can be a deacon at 10 churches through AI, and they can actually do that amount of work because they're using AI, then maybe a church doesn't mind paying $5,000 to one guy for a year to take care of all of this work. So I don't know, fractional deacon, you heard it here.
Yeah.
There is some locations where there's fractional pastors, but it's very rare. It used to be much more common in Canada like 100 years ago. But anyways.
Yeah, and I think I could see a number of guys hearing that, Joel, and having an immediate no reaction. And I would just say, like, consider it, be thoughtful, right? Actually have a conversation about things like that, right? Because it's there. I'm not saying that I would adopt it right away, but there are things to consider there that if we don't even have the conversation and don't even bring people like yourself, Joel, into those conversations to see how it could work, why we might do it, then we're not growing in wisdom. We're just acting out of instinct and fear in some cases, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's like that. Yeah, it's worth having a conversation. I don't want to have that conversation right now, but it's worth having that conversation, right?
Yeah, you have other priorities. But no, we at our church, we share. One of our staff members is part-time, and he also works part-time at another church. He does the finances for our church, and he does the finances for the other church. So he is a fractional deacon. Like, he's
There you
not
go.
officially in our church structure a deacon, but exactly what you are describing, because he's the expert in spreadsheets, right? He's the expert in knowing the tax law. He's the expert in all that kind of stuff. So in the same way, there's got to be a few experts of building and property management in Toronto that it'd be nice if churches could share that resource across, especially when they're assisted by AI to help them manage more locations and give the right context. So that's an interesting thought. You
Maybe
heard it
it's
here first.
maybe it's part of your church association, so you all feel like, hey, we're kind of loosely connected.
Well, it'd be nice if churches got along better. That's one of the things that I appreciate Scott did. So I came to Scott's church, and we got to wrap up, but I'll just share this quick story. I came to Scott's church, and one of the conversations after I presented on the pros and cons of AI at the young adult event that Scott graciously hosted, a guy was just like, really had a lot of stigma about AI. He's like, and we had a back and forth about that. And it felt a little heated because it was like, I was clearly supportive of AI in some cases. And he was like, I don't know about that. Like, and we had a back and forth. And then Scott raised his hand, and I'm like, uh-oh, what's going to happen?
Time out.
Do you remember your question, Scott?
I remember the basic point of the question I was trying to get across was like, I think it was something along the lines of in every local church, and in our local church, we're going to have people who are on both sides of the AI fence and people in the middle. Some who are absolutely not, destroy it. Let's all go back to the 1600s and farming like that.
Yeah.
Others who are going to be early adopters and it's like whatever we can use it for, let's use it for that. And then others who are kind of they're the WWJT people, right? The wisdom and technology people, and being a faithful presence in that. And it was just, how do we have unity and maintain the unity that we're called to have in Scripture while having these very important discussions and really significant disagreements?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was something like that.
Yeah, it was a great question. And it kind of reflects, because in that moment, I was thinking about all the pros and cons of AI and trying to win my argument. And I was also trying to think about some things on like the theology side too. But when you asked that question, I was like, oh, that's why you're a pastor. Like that ability to recognize the need for unity, to love and care for one another in spite of all these changes with AI, to recognize there's going to be differences of opinion. I think that was just really wise to redirect the conversation toward that. And I know I told you that in person, but now I'm sharing it with the world and all
With the
of our
world.
listeners. But
Yes.
no, Scott, I called you an average pastor. I know you. You're a good man, and I appreciate you as a friend and as a pastor. And I'm glad with what you're doing, and I'm glad for our listeners to kind of meet you as well. And you are a little famous. You're TGC Canada famous. I mean, you write a lot of articles, not just for TGC, but also for a bunch of other organs. You kind of have a writer side to you. So
I do. Yeah. Yeah, I do. It's funny. My son actually Googled me at school the other day,
oh
and
wow.
he came home. He's like, I found you on the internet. And I started reading something you wrote, and I didn't understand it, so I stopped.
Oh no.
Like, it's
Yeah.
That's
great.
funny.
But
Well, thanks
yeah,
for
no,
joining us
and
today, man.
yeah, no, super, super happy to be on with you guys. I've just really appreciated the work you guys do and have really benefited from it. And I've shared and recommended a number of your episodes with people from my church. So just want to make sure I leave on that note. And you guys really have helped me and have helped folks in my church not only understand the technologies that we have today, but also to think about them with biblical wisdom. And so I'm deeply appreciative for you guys.
Thanks, man. Use tech, find rest, glorify God. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care.
See ya.